Welcome, everybody, to Enrollment Resources podcast today. We're going to talk about how to create systemization of admissions processes by way of lean management. Now, this is a bit of an obscure topic, but given the regulatory environment that's coming down the pike and given all of the changes in terms of how millennials purchase services versus how it's done previously, this is a very important topic. So we won't spend a long time. We're going to talk about, we're going to go from kind of broad to granular, and if any of you have any questions along the way, just press *6 and chime in, and we'll be happy to answer them. Also, Lauren, if you have any questions you want to write down, Lauren can grab those and field those at the end. And I see this going maximum 30 minutes. So let's just jump in. I'd like to introduce Jim Paris. Jim is been in the admissions management game for well over 20 years, and as a senior VP admissions level, and he's based in the Northeast. And I'd like to introduce Joe Gerard, and Joe is with Enrollment Resources, and he leads our admissions retainer program here. And prior to joining us, Joe was a process improvement expert for admissions with a chain of, it was 10, a school system of 10. And so both these guys have a lot of insight in terms of what works in the trenches, combined with, all of our split testing that we've done over the last 12 years. So, without further ado, let's get rolling here. So, you guys, it appears that this third-party lead portal marketing experiment has failed. It doesn't seem to be working that well anymore. Joe, do you care to speak to that?
Yeah, I think, right now, what we're seeing a lot of is that, the schools that I've been talking with.
I just emailed you, he reset your password.
The schools that we've been talking about, I'm seeing that a lot of leads that are coming in are not really inquiring about school. And so this third-party one, we're seeing a lot of reps that are getting tired because they're not getting the quality they would like to have.
I remember they told us.
Somebody on the call needs to be muted there.
I'm just saying don't do that. So sorry about all the confusion. If April can fix it locally, that's better.
Yeah, exactly.
Do we have somebody on the call needs to be muted?
So now, Jim, what are your thoughts? Do you have any insights?
Certainly looking at processes and procedures and controllables. We know it's difficult to make contacts and to get a hold of people and to have the opportunity to have a quality conversation, and obviously the lead flow and the sources where they're coming from has shifted dramatically to almost solely, whether it's the referral end or the paid search engine. But I guess my 2 cents on the next step there, which is to measure the contact and to have an idea of how many quality conversations, whether you're an admissions rep or a director of admissions, and what your team is doing, but try to get your arms around that number as part of the funnel conversation. How many quality contacts are being done? And on average, we're seeing, as an admissions rep, 25, 30 quality exchanges, whether it's email or over the telephone, that are unenrolled students. From that spinoff, certainly having the opportunity to set an appointment and obviously with the goal of getting them on campus. So.
Yeah, exactly. So it really is a flight to quality. Our friends at Velocify, they had come out with some recent new research, which is quite, it's counterintuitive to what seem to be the sacred cows in the industry, and that is that it's actually more cost-effective to give an admissions rep 1 or 2 leads a day versus 5. So back in the day, the marketing lead gen paradigm was fill the reps up with 5 internet leads a day, let them convert 1 or 2% of those, and basically burn the rep out, dial till your fingers bleed, that kind of thing. And this new research is indicating that, if you have one lead a day that is of higher quality, that admissions reps can convert that, 30-35%. And if you run the math, the numbers almost wash out to be the same. Joe, any thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, what I've been seeing is that it's exactly what Jim is saying. It's the quality conversations that we're having rather than just volume. And with reps that are going through just a ton of volume, and they're waiting for that quality conversation to happen, it almost becomes like a surprise to them when somebody that they talk to has a more meaningful conversation, and they're not prepared to have that dialogue with them. And so that's what we're finding more and more, is to find if they can just get the right amount of leads, like you said, maybe 2 or 3 a day, that they can have meaningful conversations with. That's going to, as a leading indicator, drive those trailing indicators, which is the customers and the revenue.
And trailing indicators are always really good for a healthy school, aren't they? So then that runs to the other end of the pendulum, and that is you go from just churning out a whole bunch of crazy leads and people thrashing away to having the high quality conversation, but without having any kind of a process or an ability to split test those processes. It really is guesswork. And so the piece that has to fit in the middle, the meat in the sandwich, is that of process improvement. And if I may, you guys, I'd like to just give a background as to what process improvement is all about, and then let's talk about how that relates to admissions and admissions management. So back after the Second World War, the Allies created for Europe something called the Marshall Plan, and they went and basically put Germany back on its feet economically. But in Japan, not so much. But they did send this, what they deemed to be this crazy economist, this guy named Edward Deming, whose ideas about choke point management were not gaining any traction at all in the U.S. So they sent him off to Japan and said, hey, go try your theories with Japan. They're in need of having their economy rebuilt. So back in the day, there were these little Japanese companies like Toyota and Nissan and Mitsubishi, and these little tiny manufacturing companies that embraced this Dr. Deming's words on choke point theory, and out of that came lean management. And so what we've done is we've taken lean management, something that's used by Toyota, Apple, Microsoft, some of the best companies in the world are constantly using lean management to make these tiny little quarter turns to go and take all of these great conversations and all this activity and methodically make it better. So that's the basis for lean management. And so, Joe, how can that fit into an admissions environment? It seems, because it's like lean management's been traditionally used in manufacturing, and admissions is about as far away from manufacturing as you would get.
Well, yes and no. When we apply Deming's theory to admissions and into the sales process, what we end up seeing is that, like when I map it out on a graph, is that most processes are typically out of control. That's why I say, like on the admission side, 1 month you're the hero, the next month you're the goat. The goal is not to have these big wins and these big losses, but to bring everything into control, which is essentially what the manufacturing economy did. And so by doing that, he's reducing the amount of variation in the things that we're doing, and we're finding those choke points and the bottlenecks. And typically, as we do evaluations, it's happening at this first point of contact. So we're trying to do all of this other stuff on the marketing and on the, it's a student retention and how we're presenting our products, but it's all boiling down to this first point of contact and having, like Jim said, these meaningful conversations. So if we apply those theories to admissions, that's what we're looking for, is where are those bottlenecks? Where's that choke point, and how do we effectively address that, which then drives the whole machine. So if we were a manufacturing company, this would drop down our cost per item, and it would actually be able to help produce produce more results with less time.
Right. So an analogy that comes to mind is, a guy has a big distended belly. He's got a yeast infection, because he's just eating too much in the way of wheat and simple sugars. And by way of doing food testing and taking different foods out of your diet, that person with the yeast infection will eventually land on things that will improve their condition. And less bloating, and their tummy will shrink. Jim, is that a decent analogy, or?
Yeah, that's pretty good. I got a nice visual. You talk about a choke point. I mean, it's that is really what Joe was just touched on. That whole contact, that first initial contact, has how many and what they're like, and what that conversation needs to go to proceed with has changed dramatically. I know I'm preaching to the choir for the people on the call who are living it over the last few years, but we do all this work, right, from the marketing end, spend all these dollars and chasing down and making all these attempts, and then once we were lucky enough to get that exchange, that quality exchange, if we're sitting back saying those are all great questions, how much does school cost? Great question. I'll let you know when you come down to see us. Or what's the school like? Oh, great question. I'll let you know when you come down to see us. What's the placement like and the services like? That's a great question. We keep holding them blackmail on the visit. And you're probably seeing your show rate, right? Another choke point. And once you do have the contact, and then they're disagreeing for the appointment, and some of them aren't showing up. That conversation and the ability to balance information, right? You're asking questions, but you got to give up some information. They're informed. So in some cases, they know more about your school than you do.
Just if I could just jump in, Joe. You were just mentioning in a chat we had earlier today about millennials who we're primarily marketing to in education are really 2/3 of the way there and before they even pick up the phone. You care to expand on that?
Yeah. Just like Jim was saying, they're more informed than ever. One of the stats that came out, not just in education, but in general, is that with information that's out there, is customers are 60% of the way through the buying process. And when I ask reps, most of them will agree to that. But at the same time, is when we actually review how many of your potential students are really well informed when they call you, we're agreeing that's probably only about 5 to 10%. So we have this disconnect between how much information they have and how much knowledge they have on what they're doing. So if we're just brokers of information on the phone, and like I was saying earlier, is I listen to mystery shops all the time for schools all over the place, and it's very rare that we hear people that knock it out of the park, that ask great questions, that qualify deeply, that be able to make a connection and not just, jump in to say what they want to say about their product and service, and then they wonder why people aren't showing up.
And it's really interesting to me because what happens, people, how do I say this? Well, okay, somebody's thinking about education, so now they're on websites. And we know that a lot of websites are written in such a way that it's full of ad puffery. In other words, these websites to varying degrees lie. But they people take these websites at gospel, at face value, and then they're into Yelp and they're reading Yelp reviews and Google Plus reviews, and they take that information at face value. They don't know who wrote that information. It could have been planted by the school, or it could have been planted by a competitor to bring down a competitor. There's all kinds of nasty undercurrent social media activity that happens. It's quite mean and predatory that happens online. These folks are gathering information, and while they may be 60% of the way there, what's interesting is a lot of the information is inaccurate, and admissions reps have this unenviable task of having to deconstruct what they know, help them eliminate what is incorrect, and fill back in what is correct and valuable information for them to help them in their decision. Jim, do you want to speak to that, like deconstructing incorrect information?
Yeah, you're right. They are informed, and some of it's not completely accurate, right? They're getting their circle of friends and certainly past people who've gone to your campuses, and some are happy, some weren't. The website and some of the marketing material, and so you really need to ask some good probing questions up front when you do have that contact, to have some playback and have some understanding, so you're making sure you got a level playing field, and you're addressing really what the needs are and what they're looking for, and what they have in their head, their preconceived notions. All that there needs to be some just fundamental admissions work. We still need to get back to just asking a few good solid questions, get permission to do so, but you need to go there. And then once that happens, then you can start to build up obviously some of the feature benefits and the things that the college does. But that, coupled with you being the pro, we really need our admissions teams need to go to another level with knowledge, with insight, with program information, with industry outlooks, with career outlooks. We need to be the pros. Wherever we are, we need to get the next rung on that ladder to be the go-to, where they hang up the phone and they say, not that some person wants me to come down to see them at the campus, that I want to go see this guy, Joe, because he said he's going to hook me up with the career services person who worked with an employer who was telling him how this industry is going to have openings in the next here locally around our campus in the next 2 years. Information like that.
So along those lines, that having people sitting as professionals in admissions, there has to be a structure, because you can't just have this as sort of a chaotic exchange. So to that end, there really is, folks on the call, a little 5-step communication process that you might want to write down, and we're going to take you through it, Joe and I, and we're just going to teach you a little something that you could take away from this call. So here are the 5 steps. You guys write this down or type it out. Step 1 is to set the agenda. Step 2 is to deeply understand the prospective person on the phone. Step 3 is to be understood. And then step 4 is to share the learning of the conversation. And then step 5 is to take your little baby steps. And so let's talk about setting the agenda first. Folks have an inherent belief that admissions people are liars. And that's because they have this deep and inherent sales prejudice that, because people have been screwed over so many times, whether it's buying a car, a computer, insurance, what have you, or friends. So people go in guarded and cynical. And so you have to eliminate that sales prejudice. So the way you do that in 20 seconds or less is you just set the agenda. You tell people what you're going to do to them on a phone call or in a meeting. You tell them the worst thing that's going to happen to them. You gain permission from them that that's an okay process. And then you proceed. So, Joe, in fact, that's kind of like the first sale, isn't it, to negotiate the process?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And then the next piece is to understand people. Now, Joe, you've got some really interesting insights around this. It's really about qualifying people to a degree that folks are probably not comfortable doing. And so admissions people are typically kind of, when they get nervous or tired, they default to a presentation mode. But what we advocate for is staying in that question for as long as humanly possible to allow us to customize their life journey. Why don't you deepen in on that comment, if you would?
Sure. There was I had a call last week with a group because I went visited my family and I went golfing. I took my 14-year-old nephew golfing, and I had a huge light bulb for myself. He hit his ball over by this other group of guys, and I said to him, "Go over there and ask those guys if it's okay for you to hit your ball." And he looked at me like I had just asked him to jump off a bridge, and he was terrified. And so I said, "Well, just go over, just say, hey, can I go hit my ball, and then just go hit your ball and come back." and he wouldn't move. He was frozen. So I just said, hey, guys, is it okay? He hits his ball. And they said, yeah, no problem. So he went over there, hit the ball, and then came sprinting back as fast as a 14-year-old could ever run. And it was that moment that I realized that, for me, what may seem simple for me to do might be absolutely terrifying for somebody else. It might be really uncomfortable for somebody else. And so on our phone calls, we have to determine the level of comfort that people have. A lot of students, when they call in for the first time, this is a very scary thing for them. A lot of people, they're asking for help, they're asking for change, and if we just get into presentation mode, we miss an opportunity to be empathetic with them. And if we don't ask the right questions, we don't help them frame the problem correctly, and we're just one more source of information. So what's going to make them feel value in coming to see us? So our ability to connect with people on the phone is the number one skill. When reps start to develop that really, really well, to build relationships at first point of contact, their numbers go through the roof. People are more willing to
if I may just jump, if I can jump in. So the key really is to creating that connection is to really understand the other person on the other side of the phone, to really understand what makes their heart beat, what makes their soul stir, and the bonus is that people love to be in control, they love to be right, they love to be acknowledged, and any time that you can spend some extra effort to ask people about their hopes, their dreams, their career path, some really juicy, gooey, high-quality questions, they feel fantastic. And, if they feel fantastic, those 6 or 7 other schools that they're considering working with, they just shut that down because they're getting love. They're getting love from that admissions rep in the way of this nurturing, caring person who is really curious about learning about who they are. Does that sound a little kind of sappy or what? No?
No. I know you're not asking me, Greg, but that's exactly some empathy, and for them to feel that they don't have a horn on their head, that you acknowledge their position and what they've shared, you thank them for them being so candid, and that you're not alone. There's many people that have situations like that, and this is what we do here, and this is how this works, and you use their name. Those feel good moments are huge. I mean, we've tracked, and I'm sure your campuses that are out there have tracked, from the lead entry, the date, when they first reached out, and how long, some call, set the appointment, come in that day and enroll, all in one day. Some take a couple days, some take a week, some take a month. I mean, we've seen that if the reps who keep that good positive contact, and there's legitimate reasons why they can't make a decision this term, this quarter, or whenever your start is, if you keep that door open for a callback, they do enroll. I mean, some campuses are getting 30% that are 6 months or older, 30% of their enrollment.
So then, the key is here is that is empathy is the juice that runs through the admissions reps' veins, the best ones, and that questions are the tools that the admissions reps use to make that garden grow and to enhance the lives. I mean, what's cool is whether somebody goes to school with you or not, or decides to go to school, period, if an admissions rep does their job properly by asking those juicy, gooey, wonderful questions, they leave the office of the admissions rep with more clarity around where they're heading in their life. And what a gift that is for somebody. Hey, Joe?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And so by understanding somebody to greater depth, now flipping back our business hat on, if you can understand somebody to a greater, deeper depth, in fact, greater than maybe they understand themselves, then you're able to communicate in such a way that you're not wasting their time. You're communicating in a laser-like fashion where you're giving people the information they need to help them in their decision-making path. Joe, do you care to enhance on laser-like communication?
Absolutely. So I always help people work through sort of a 3-part conversation, and the first one is asking some questions, like you said, to get them to open up. Then the second part is making sure that we really listen to whatever they say and then dig in on that and say, hey, that was really interesting what you said here. Can you help me understand that a bit more? most of the time what I hear is we ask them questions and then they say something. Now we rush to solve, and we say, and even if our information is just the best information, we've tested it, it doesn't resonate. By digging deeper, we're able to actually now help them frame the problem, and the solution is something that we collaboratively create together. I had a rep earlier this week that we were working on this, and she decided that she was going to test some of this stuff out, push herself out of the comfort zone and ask some more difficult questions in her calls. And she had a lady that wasn't returning her calls and finally got a hold of her and just said, based on what's been going on, I'm assuming that maybe you're having a bit of a difficult time with this, because you told me last time you're a mom, and this must be a big decision for you. Can you help me understand? There's lots of information. And she just opened up, started crying over the phone, saying, I was really nervous. I didn't know what to say to you, and everybody's calling me, asking me to come to school, and I don't know what to say. And so she said, are you a mom too? And they had this whole connection on what it's like to be a mother and making decisions like this. And so just, pushing herself out of that comfort zone to ask more difficult questions opened up a dialogue that she wouldn't have normally had.
So, okay, so now, we've got setting the agenda, understanding a person to a great degree. Now, Tash or Ray, you're on the call here too, and I guess just circling around, folks. Tash is similar to Jim and Joey's. Has like 30 years experience in enrollment management with some great schools, and I think what's interesting, Tash, is that to really go to that place of empathy and being there for other people is it requires discipline. It requires you have to have part of a process, and this is really a process of spreading empathetic energy around. It requires discipline to do that because it's an other conscious kind of activity, and humans are self-centered. You want to expand on that?
Sure. I'm a big believer in having talking points, and I've seen many different phone scripts out there, and for the most part, they have a nice logical flow to them. The thing is, our prospect on the other end of the phone always won't fit into that flow. And so you have these points of breakdown, especially right out of the gate when you're trying to engage them. And the most common opening question I see is, what program are you interested in? So we invite a no right out of the gate. Then if we are able to engage them and they are sharing information with us, is that information, are you hearing it? Are you feeding it back to them? And are you making it easy for them to expand on it? That natural progression of information sharing is they're giving us information, we're hearing it, we're sharing information back with them, what we heard, and maybe adding to it, maybe punching a couple points, a couple of the features and benefits of your institution, and then following that up immediately with another question that just keeps it easier for them to open up to you.
So that's an interesting point. What you're really talking about is feeding back what you've heard is really the fourth step here, and that is all about sharing the learning, where people have opened up and they've spilled their guts. They often don't even know what they've said in a way. There's an emotional release of information that's been stuffed up in their head, and it's kind of a torrent of stuff coming out. And as Joe said, it can often bring people to tears or different emotions. And so a good admissions rep in this process will then consolidate and say, well, this is what I've learned. Is that right? Tash, you care to expand on sharing the learning?
Yeah, that is exactly right. So, and it's simple things, okay, so what I heard you say is, you're checking for understanding, or you might be relating a personal example, like the example Joe gave earlier, when he realized he was, the person was working with realized they were dealing with a similar other, another single mother. So, anything that you can share from your own life experience that helps the prospect see you, as a similar other, or as someone that has a lot of experience and wisdom in dealing with the same kinds of issues, they're going to want to hear more. They're going to want to learn more. You're going to start to create a connection. You're going to start to create some trust.
Got it. So what's interesting from my perspective is that there's every time that you circle back and communicate and reiterate what somebody is saying, and they're in agreement, Joe, it's kind of like making, putting the business hat back on, it's kind of like making a little tiny micro sale. Every time you can create agreement with somebody on even a point of communication, it creates a positive bonding point. What do you think of that?
Absolutely, and I know we've got sort of, this gets into this sort of realm of this is all feel-good stuff. Let's get back to the business case of people always say, well, I don't have time to do this kind of stuff. What if I don't have time? The answer is you don't have time not to do this. If you're spending all your time chasing your customers because you didn't build relationships at first point of contact, you're going to lose just because of the numbers. The people that actually take action on this stuff, they're genuinely curious about the customer on the other end. They're finding those places that they can relate, like Tash is saying, that they're completely authentic on the phone, and they're setting their energy before that call. Those are the ones that are winning the game. And you can feel that when you call somebody. You can tell when they're on or when they're not. And so one of my metrics I always measure is how quickly can we be authentic? Like as soon as we pick up the phone, are we ready to have that conversation, or are we just picking it up as one more thing we got to do? And the people on the other end can feel that. So if you don't feel like you have time to have these conversations, you're going to lose because it's going to be a lot of entropy in your process trying to chase people.
And then, of course, if you've done a great job of becoming world-class at asking empathetic, emotionally based questions and creating connection, the sharing of the learning becomes really easy. And then as a byproduct, moving along with that little tiny baby step becomes a no-brainer. And as long as you're advancing things along, pushing the marble along, then you're going to make progress. And so to that end, Jim, you spoke about how to create that little contextual tiny advance in the admissions process. Quickly, can you just have a couple words on that?
Yeah, that we keep talking about quality conversations, and it really comes down to that. You have a solid, insightful conversation. You have a little rapport that's been built up. You're starting your relationship with them, and there's some outcomes, right? Some of the outcomes can be the natural next step of an appointment, right, to come in with solid value for the visit and why they'd want to do that. There could be some referral opportunities. But there's also this, and you probably, hopefully do a lot of this, but to what degree, I'm not sure, which is to maintain and leave that door open for the next best thing besides a visit, which is another conversation. And
the little process that you can use there is if they're not coming in for a visit, you negotiate a little 15-minute phone call, and so that you're not playing phone tag and hunting people down. Now, listen, I need to be respectful of people's time here, and we are 4 minutes beyond what we promised. So, ladies and gents, what we're going to offer you on the call is, if anybody's interested, is the first 3 people that text in their information, we'll offer a complimentary mystery shop for your school. And this will be a first point of contact mystery shop. People seem to really find these interesting when we complete them for them. We've done well over 500 of these over the last 12 years. So here's what you do is you text the following number, 1250, it's the area code, 391-9494. It's 250-391-9494. First 3 people will fit you into our research schedule. We have a production schedule for that, and it'll be on us. Now, anybody has to leave. This is the formal part of our presentation. It's now over. But we will hang around if anybody has any clarifying comments or questions they might ask. And Lauren, you might have one or two, or you can press *6 on your phone, you guys, and that'll bring you into the conversation. So who has a question for some of these admissions gurus? Nobody. Well,
I do have one from Erin Fitzgerald online. I'm not sure if Erin's still on the call.
okay.
But she asked, what are your thoughts for schools that have internal call center? They touch base with prospective students prior to the campus admission advisors. So she's asking specifically for feedback and how to direct them, perhaps.
Tash, why don't you start with that call?
Well, first of all, if somebody has that situation, I think the admissions reps are very fortunate because the call center folks are the ones that are going to deal with a lot of that upfront rejection. So in terms of your spirit of your troops, your spirit of your admissions reps, it's typically a little bit higher because they're not facing as much of that initial rejection. So if that question is, how does the call center rep handle engaging with the prospect, that's different than how does the admissions rep handle the warm transfer. So I'm not sure which direction we want to go there, but
I'll take a crack. I'll take a crack at it. Then, what we found in our mystery shopping that you have to be really careful for, Aaron, to watch out for is a lot of these live transfers that happen with the internal call centers. People can be left on hold for 2, 3, 4 minutes, and it's brutal. And prospective students drop the calls, and all these hard-fought leads and prospects just drift away to a competitor. And so there has to be a real tight process management piece there around live transfers, where if somebody's not picking up after 20 seconds, you have to loop back, and that call center person has to pick up and deal with that call and set up, as Jim had pointed out, a phone call.
Hey, Greg, can you hear me?
I sure can. Is this Aaron?
Yeah. So in our instance, and I think in a few other schools, our internal admission support center, our call center, they're actually setting the appointments. So they don't even, the only time they do a live transfer is if they need to talk to someone at the campus. So they're actually setting the appointment for the admissions advisors. So they're the upfront, kind of sales team where they have the prospective student on the phone, they're listening to a few of their needs, and they're actually setting the appointment for the person to show up at the ground campus.
And where's that breaking down? Well,
I think for many of us, and what you've said before, is just the contact rate for one thing, but I kind of view it as our admissions support center really is kind of your front-end sales team.
Yep.
They've got to be more kind of sales-focused, needs-focused, and not just appointment setters.
Yes, so Joe, speaking to Erin's point, she's hitting it dead on, and I think the front-end sales support team or the director of first impressions, I think the theme of our call is if these call centers can really deepen their skill set around asking intelligent, deep, juicy questions, Joe, that could go a tremendously long way in cementing what is really a tentative relationship that's kind of holding by a thread. These guys are running with very little information, so you need to deepen and anchor that relationship before that appointment is set. You care to speak to that, Joe?
Totally. Yeah. The two words when I'm working on the training side is cross edification. This is one thing that will absolutely transform when you have appointment setters, and also throughout your organization. If you have people that deal with customers, so you have more than one customer-facing person that is handing somebody over, even when you have somebody that goes from an admissions rep to a director setting up appointments for somebody else, there's a transfer of trust that needs to happen. So when you build a relationship on the phone and you're an appointment setter, what you should be doing is really celebrating the person that they're going to meet, not the process they're going to go through. So you would say, if I'm setting up an appointment for Jim, I say, oh, this is great. You're going to love this this program that you're looking at and you've got some great questions, I'm going to set you up an appointment with Jim. He's awesome. He's got X amount of years experience. Here's what he really is good at when he's working with students. You're going to love meeting with him. He's really funny. He's a super nice guy. And when you get together, here's the kinds of things you guys are going to go through. Now, through that process, I've transferred this relationship onto Jim, and they're excited to meet that person. Without that, if I just built a relationship with them, they want to talk to me. Now, if I'm saying, oh, this is great, we're having a good time, now you're going to go meet a stranger, that's a bit intimidating. And the other part of the piece is now when Jim gets that person to come in for the appointment, he's saying, wasn't it great talking to Joe? Didn't he really help you with that information? He's really good at these things. And they're going to see that not only is it valuable to talk to one person, but it's valuable to talk to everybody in the organization. It's going to be a reflection of your company as a whole. So when you start getting into cross-edification, it's huge.
Now, stacking onto cross-edification is to give your call center people the courage to be world-class. And what world-class, one example of world-class would be to ask those outside-the-box, life-oriented questions. So who comes in to, talk about education, and then all of a sudden this person on the call center says, hey, tell me a bit about your life. What are you doing right now? And I want to make sure that I get you going in the right direction here and that we're not wasting your time. I just need to ask you a few questions, and if you don't want to answer them, no problem. And then you get into that nurturing tone, and it's, hey, what's keeping you up at night? Why are you frustrated? Why are you calling us? And these kinds of questions that people don't slot in with a call center. Why not break that mold? And why not take this into a little 5-minute gift that might help to change a person's life by just having the courage to ask these really interesting questions with somebody that they don't even know. I don't know if that...
a few more questions for the team to go on.
Sure.
A few more?
But before you begin, Erin, does that help a tiny bit?
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Talk to you soon.
So I know we've touched on this before, but what are, not in this call, potentially extra from that, but what are our thoughts on leaving messages for prospects?
I'll speak to that real quick and then ask the guys to jump in. A phone message is a radio ad with an audience of one person. And if you have a radio ad, then, hey, the best practice of direct response is you can split run test that radio ad. And so what reps don't do is they don't have a disciplined testing process. So speaking to what Tash said earlier is you have a talking point, you leave a message, you calculate how many people are responding, and then that becomes what's called your control. And then the game is to beat the control. And after 6 or 7 renditions of trial and error of trying different phone messages, you should be able to improve the number of people that you talk to by 3 to 5%. Now you say, oh, that's not much, Greg. But let's think this through. If somebody's making 30 outbound phone calls a day, attempts, that is 660 a month. And if we can get that person to talk to 5% more people they were not otherwise talking to, that's an extra 33 phone conversations that they otherwise would not have. And conservatively, if that converts at 10%, that's an extra 3 students a month. That's 36 students a year. That's $900,000 a year on a certificate program by simply split testing the phone message. Wow. Tash, do you want to add on to my math, or do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think that the message depends on the type of lead and the age of the lead, and I am for leaving messages. And 25 years ago, I wasn't so pro leaving messages, but there wasn't nearly the amount of outreach to that prospective student that there is today. So the fresher that lead, just reconnect them with, hey, you had done some research on the internet and filled out a contact form. What's not perfect in your life yet? I'm calling to provide you with information. here's my name, here's my number, please give me a call, something fairly simple like that. When it's an older lead and you're reworking leads, that's a very different.
But Tash, if I can jump in, it doesn't matter. I would challenge and just say it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the message is. What matters is the protocol of split testing until you get to best practice.
Oh, I agree with that.
So what that might work, or maybe it doesn't. But really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's the process of split testing to get there.
And then I think if you're calling a lead that has some age to it, you have to re-engage the student with why they initially reached out and completed that contact information to begin with. Something's not right in their life, and if you're calling them and it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, or it's 2 months, 3 months later, that's a different message than if somebody called in and it's only an hour later.
Yes. There's this guy, Jim Jeffries, with Trios College. It's a chain of schools in Ontario. Really good, high-quality school. And we were running all these folks through split testing exercises, and we were on a group call, and he had gotten to the point of where he said, well, this when somebody doesn't show up for an appointment, this is what I do. And he leaves the message. It goes, this is Jim from Trios. You didn't show up for your appointment. Hey, when you get serious about your life, give me a call. Click. And all of his peers were all going, that is so rude, blah, blah, blah. How could you do that? And then finally, after he got beaten up, one gal said, well, what's your conversion on that? And he said, it's 86%. So 86% of the people he left that message with came just groveling back for the meeting, begging to have Jim take them through the process, and he converted a good, healthy percentage. Now, I'm not advocating that is the comment you use, but that's what he landed on through his split testing. And interesting. Lauren, another question?
Yeah, I've got another question. This is from Jenny. She's saying that about the fact that we said high volumes aren't necessarily the most important, but her school tries to reach out to get as many people as they can, and she's wondering if we're saying that we should cut down on the number of calls and have more conversations, because a lot of people just have one question, and they just want that answered, and at what point do they keep trying to call back that person? There's a couple different questions in there.
So when you get someone on the phone and they just want to ask one question, then your first sale is to negotiate the agenda. The first sale is to sell them on the fact that there should be some other questions they should ask, and that you should be allowed to ask some questions of them. That's your first little tiny baby sale. Joe, do you want to talk about the little tiny baby sale?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, if we go back to what we're saying is that customers are really, they're more informed than ever. But if we also know that they're not prepared at a rate of like 90-95%, then if we just answer that question and let them go on their way, we're actually not giving them a service. We might as well just outsource this thing. The power of admissions is to be able to, like we said, is to start to diagnose but seek to understand. So even just something as simple as saying, let me look that up for you, just to stall a little bit so that we can actually ask them another question. So how long have you been thinking about doing this, or what makes you interested in that? What research have you done before? Something that gets them to share a little bit of info, because 99% of the calls, they don't just have one question. They need help navigating this information. If we just answer that call, we're not actually giving them a good service.
And if you don't give them good service, then you're ripping them off. It's like imagine well into the future, you could only get your water through water stores, and you had enough, and somebody came in and they were to get their one glass of water a day. Now, does that water salesman just take that money for that one glass, knowing that that person needs 6 or 7 glasses of water a day, or does that water salesman make an extra effort to do what's right for that person? Lauren, any other questions?
I do. I have one from Henry asking if our team feels there would be a day where a face-to-face interview will no longer exist.
Well, Tash, I guess, really, online education.
What was the question?
Go ahead, Lauren.
Sorry, it was just asking if our team thought there would be a day when the face-to-face interview will no longer exist.
I can jump in for a second if you want me to. This is Jim. I mean, there's been a few campuses that have already gone down the virtual tour, or ones that they've had quality conversations, but they have not been able to get them down to the campus, and there's been some legitimate reasons for them not to visit this week or two in the next 2 weeks. And is it appropriate to actually do have a conversation or a virtual interview touring with the computer and be able to go a little farther virtually? And so that's been, again, it's a small percentage, and it needs to be used wisely, but there are campuses, and I was part of them, where they did financial aid over from the person was at home and have done the interview virtually. But again, we're not there yet, and from this is the mainstream. But is there an opportunity for something along those lines? Absolutely. And again, you can't lose something you don't have. I mean, if they're not coming to your campus, they're saying all the right things, and we keep holding them back to, we'll talk about that when you come down. It's not moving along.
No, the whole idea of holding back information is a dead horse. But we have our virtual advisor software, which is a lead qualification software that's working tremendously well in advancing people's interest remotely without connecting with people. But I think to answer Henry's question, education is a large ticket intangible. That's where you would classify it in as a marketing matrix when you're looking at this from a marketing perspective. And large ticket intangibles, even now, need what we call a synchronous exchange. Synchronous, where you're across from somebody via the phone or in person. Asynchronous is where you're having a disjointed exchange, whether it be text messaging or email or what have you, or written word. And you want to ideally be face-to-face because of the tools, the communication tools that you have in your quiver. Written word is really just 5, 6, 7% of the total arsenal you have in terms of communicating effectively. And when you get someone on the phone, the total quality is a big jump. It takes it up like 35, 38% when you add in the voice, the tonal quality that comes with the voice. But when you get in front of somebody, right, and your hands are flying around because you're excited and your tone of your face flushes because you're enthused, it's all unconscious stuff. But the admissions reps truly believes in what they do. It all oozes out in kinesthetic cueing, and that is what really people. That's where people learn, is from how people look at you, how their hands fly around because they're all excited, how they shift in their seat, their skin tone, how they fidget, eye contact. All those little things that we've been trained as humans to learn about our entire life get synthesized into that one exchange. Joe, you want to jump on that?
Yeah, and then I have to jump on a call here in about 2 minutes. So what it is, I mean, people are still calling. They need to get information. They want some help, and they want to have meaningful conversations. And we work with some schools that are strictly online, so there isn't even an option to get face-to-face. And what we're seeing more, I think, with the question is a lot of people saying, well, I just want to get the information over the phone because everybody today thinks that they're really, really busy. So what we have to do, no matter whether it's on the phone or face-to-face, we have to sell the value of having a deeper conversation. If we don't sell that value to say, hey, you know what, whether it's on the phone, face-to-face, on Skype, or whether we email each other or do carrier pigeons, it doesn't matter, that we are saying, hey, the next step is we're going to be doing these series of things, and we can either do it on the phone or face-to-face. So there could be a day where we see more phone appointments, but we have to make sure that people do buy typically in stages, that we don't try and do it all in one shot, that, like Greg said, set the agenda and help them move to a more meaningful conversation. And if you're just measuring from leads to conversions overall, you're missing a really important piece, like Jim said, is the metric of how many meaningful dialogues that you have with your leads that are coming in.
That's a perfect segue. I think it's time to say goodbye. I know there are other questions, but we have other folks have to disperse here. If anybody has any other specific questions that they want answered, we'll be happy to do that in person. All you have to do is text 250-391-9494, 250-391-9494, and Paul Bertarelli, our liaison officer for the company, will button down some time, and one of the four of us can help you out. So for those that are still left on the call, I just wanted to thank you for hanging in and hope we've given you guys a lift and shared